started. Welcome to the first safeguarding briefing of 2022. I think we've probably got an awful lot to happen this year. There's still a lot to catch up from last year as well. And over the course of the next 15-20 minutes or so, I'll give you a bit more information about me and some of the highlights of things that are going on in the wider world of safeguarding at the moment, and some things for you to consider over the coming weeks and months as well. I will also say that when you get the link for this, if you know of other people who want the link, then feel free to share the link with them. I'm more than happy for the link to the briefing to be shared with your colleagues if they want to have it. Please don't just send it to everybody. But if they want it, then I'm more than happy for you to share it with them. So who am I quickly? Well, I'm Kate Young. Let's do it this way. 20 years legal experience. I'm now a non-practicing solicitor, though I still work for local authorities. I'm particularly working for a local authority at the moment on their improvement team, following some really significant judgments against the local authority. So I'm now working with the legal team and the client department to help them improve their practice when it comes to child protection. And I also work with our safeguarding leaders in the Safeguarding Association membership, our Safeguarding Leaders Hub, where we work around issues affecting them on a day-to-day basis. And I provide informal supervision on a one-to-one basis for them. For today's purposes, make sure you move somewhere quiet. And of course, if you've got questions and you're here live, ask away. Use the chat function to do that is probably the best way to do it. And feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer them whilst we are here. Just so you know, if you've never come across us before, we are specialists in supporting safeguarding professionals who particularly work with 15 to 25-year-olds. It's a very grey area. Child protection is often grey anyway, but this is probably the greyest of the grey areas. And for some strange reason, I seem to absolutely love working in this really grey area. And that's our specialist area. So what has been happening over the last few months? Well, we've had some big news. We've had some big court cases, which you will have to have been under a rock to have not seen over the last few months, and we will touch on those. For now, let's have a look at some of the guidance. I was notified earlier this week that there are some big outcomes that are big consultations that are floating about at the moment, and I'd urge you to get involved if this is an area that affects you. We know, I certainly know from my work as an independent safeguarding chair with colleges, that the issue of self-harm and suicidal ideation has been at the top of their incident lists for about the last 4 years. It's huge. NICE have started a consultation around the response to self-harm and how that can be improved. It's open to individuals to respond and organisations, companies, charities to respond. And the response date must be by the 1st of March 2022, with the government response or NICE response thereafter, probably 3 to 6 months later down the line following that consultation. If you are working with young people who are affected by self-harm, who use self-harm as a coping mechanism, then I urge you to take a look at this consultation and include and add your voice to it. Consultations work best when there's a broad range of people responding, and so they don't just have one side of the issue that's being discussed. So that is available. If you just type into your search engine, NICE self-harm consultation, it should come up for you. Those of you who've been on my briefings for probably most of last year, certainly since the Domestic Abuse Act came into force, will know that there was a consultation around the statutory guidance to support the Domestic Abuse Act. So for pretty much all pieces of legislation, there is the piece of legislation, so in this case, the Domestic Abuse Act, And then there is statutory guidance. That guidance tells you how the law should be applied. It tells you how each of those various bits of legislation need to be interpreted. And so there was a consultation out in relation to that, particularly around the issue of children being seen as victims. That consultation has closed. The outcome on the consultation is still awaited. I'm hopeful that we'll get that in the not too distant future. But I suspect it may be another couple of months before we get that outcome. There's no date. I've checked again today, and there isn't a date as far as I can see for the outcome, the government's response to that consultation to be published. The other big consultation that was out last year was around the protect duty. Now, this is important if you are working for an organisation where you have spaces open to the public. So leisure centres, theatres, I know lots of colleges lease or rent their space out to theatre companies or to other events. Protect is all about, it's an extension. If you work in education, you'll know about the prevent duty. Well, protect is an extension of that, but applies essentially to the private sector. That consultation has now finished. The government response has been published. That was published on the 10th of January. It is available if you go to gov.uk, down to publications and consultations, she says, trying to remember, and just type in protect duty consultation, it will come up for you. So the responses come out. There were 2,755 respondents to that consultation, which is a huge number of people responding either individually or as part of an organisation to the duty that was put forward. So you can see the responses, the statistics that come out of those responses in that documentation. What this is going to mean is the government will look at the impact of that. They've set out what the response actually was, and now they will go away and they will look at what that duty needs to look like, and and we'll watch this space for the outcome in terms of government legislation for the protect duty and quite what that is actually going to look like in reality. Because it's great talking hypothetically, but it's only once it starts to go through legislation that we then realise and we can look at what things are going to look like in actuality. So keep an eye out for that, but it's worth a read. It's definitely worth a read to have a look at, particularly if you are going to get caught by this. It's worth a read to see what people's views were. They're only very general. They're in terms of the number of people that have responded, so they're talking percentages and what people's general views were within them, but it's definitely worth a look. So that's guidance. What's been happening in the legal world? Well, it will not have escaped your notice or your attention that there have been a couple of fairly big things to hit the press actually in the last couple of days, as well as the last few weeks, which we'll touch on in a moment. The first one is around the issue of child sexual exploitation, and this has never really left the press in any great way. Yet again, I know that there is a documentary that has come out in relation to CSE, child sexual exploitation, as opposed to child criminal exploitation. And the documentary talked about CSE next door. And I think for those of us that have worked in this arena for some time, we know that it isn't isolated to particular areas of a town. We know that it isn't dirty bedsits where this happens. It can, and it does, but it's also a reminder that you can live in a nice suburban area and still have issues of CSE happening in your neighbourhood. So that documentary is out. I think, she says, I think it's a Channel 4 documentary, and it's worth a watch. Again, if you just type into your search engine CSE documentary, that should appear for you. But the thing I really wanted to focus on for today's purposes and today's briefing is the news around prosecutions. So there's been a piece of research around the number of prosecutions for CSE, and looking at what's happened over the last 4 years. So 2016-17 compared with 2020-2021. Now, pandemic notwithstanding, these figures are scary. So prosecutions for CSE have more than halved in that 4-year period. So we've gone from over 6,000 prosecutions, well over 6,000 prosecutions a year, to just over 3,000 prosecutions a year. That's an enormous drop. The other scary thing for me as well is that the number of convictions have dropped by 45% in the same period. So we've gone from 4,751 convictions in 2016-2017 down to 2,595 in 2020-2021. Now, it may be that COVID has part of that, has got something to do with that, but that's a significant drop to have occurred. And we know that issues of CSE are still really prevalent. We know that we haven't got rid of the issue. We know it still happens. We know it still goes on. We know that despite there being pieces of legislation, things like the Modern Slavery Act, all of those pieces of legislation still exist, but yet we still have this drop in convictions. And we have, importantly, for there to be a drop in convictions, there has been a drop in prosecutions as well, and a significant drop in prosecutions as well. So it will be worthwhile, and I'm going to keep an eye for any further explanation as to why that has happened. I'm fairly certain that this will be picked up as part of a review to understand what has happened and why that has dropped. If you're watching this and you've got any good resources and you know why this has happened, maybe you're taking part in the part of a study that looks at why this has dropped, then I'd be really interested to know. So please, I'd love you to share that with me if at all possible. We have the Police Crimes and Sentencing Bill. This has been in the press for quite some time. There are new measures that have been added to try and keep women safer. You'll know that the issue of women being safe on the streets, women being safe anywhere, has been really high in the media. There have been a significant number of really tragic deaths of women. The most recent one not 2 weeks ago over in Northern Ireland. So it is absolutely worthwhile to keep an eye on this. There has been some sort of naysaying about some of the changes. At this moment in time, I think any change is potentially a good step in the right direction, particularly the increasing of time to report common assault or battery from 6 months to 2 years. And that's important because if you do any work around domestic abuse, you know how difficult it can be for a victim to report. If you think of the Domestic Abuse Act that brings the age of victims down to 16, that can be incredibly difficult for them to be able to say that this has happened. It can be incredibly difficult for them to realise that what has happened to them is common assault or battery, and that it's something that should be reported to the police. So the extension of that is really, really positive, and hopefully will mean that more women are able to report those incidences within that time frame, because 6 months really is not a long period of time at all. Also want to mention here, it's the 6-year anniversary of coercive and controlling behaviour becoming illegal. So we knew it was a psychological form of domestic abuse, but it became its own piece of illegal activity. It had its own criminal piece of legislation around it back in 2015. So it's the 6-year anniversary of that becoming illegal. So definitely one to remember, because I did overhear something several weeks ago of somebody talking about coercive and controlling behaviour, but it's not illegal, you can't do anything about it. And I had to stop them mid-conversation and say, yes, it is, go and report it, and make sure that you do something about it, because that is absolutely illegal what they have done. There are criminal sanctions for it. So even though it's been around for 6 years, there's still, I think, a lot of education to be done around that particular area. Next legal issue, this and the death of Star were utterly tragic, and I am not going to take anything away from that whatsoever. We need to be aware as professionals there is a national review that is going to be completed by May 2022. So we'll wait and see what that says. I would love this to be something that's really actionable. I would love this review to give real practical steps, some real practical guidance as to how our services can better support families in the face of very, very manipulative, narcissistic and avoidant parents and carers. I'd really like it to talk about how, as independent or individual organisations, so if we think of the 3 safeguarding partners, health, police and social care, what steps they can take to better work together with these sorts of issues. I really don't want it to be another, we've got lessons to learn, we need to do this, we need to do that, because every single serious case review that has ever been published seems to say the same thing, and nothing ever seems to change. Yes, the local authority in question gets thousands, if not millions of pounds thrown at it. The problem with that is, after a few years, the team that's brought in to make the change moves on. If nothing seems to happen immediately, then teams can just drop back to the way they were doing things beforehand. So I'd really love this to talk about how we can do things in a really practical way. I don't want high level stuff. I think we really need to look at that real practical stuff. How do we best support social workers, teachers, other frontline staff who are dealing with manipulative, deceptive parents to better support each other? How do we better support those who are working right on the front line of this? Because ultimately, we have to make sure that we are giving them the right support so that they can in turn protect the likes of Arthur, of Star, and I'll add into that list of Peter, of Victoria, because it seems to me that every review that comes out just says the same stuff, and nothing nothing substantive ever really seems to change on the ground. And that's what needs to change. We don't need any great big, we need to do this, we need to do that, isn't this all of these big steps that need to be taken? We need to think about really practicable things that can happen on the ground, which make sharing of information easier. And I'll throw it out there. the big thing for me is that none of the services have the same system. There are different recording systems within local authorities. There are different ways of sharing then in the police, and then the health service has its own way of doing things. I would love to see a central place for children who've been identified as being at risk and on a plan to go somewhere centrally, because we're all working as a partnership now. It's no longer just the local authority. There is a partnership with it. I know it's not going to be easy, but let's be honest, dealing with these deaths isn't easy. So we need to do something. And I would love to see that happen with the appropriate safeguards in place. But I do think we need to make sure that we have information secure, but easily shareable. It blows my mind that we can't get information shared in a timely manner from one school to another because their systems don't work together. How is that even possible? So just that, for me, make that the easiest thing to do. That's really practicable. Get a system in place that means that all of the partners can share information really easily about what is going on. Also, just to mention that there is still ongoing the independent review into social care. That is still ploughing on. I'll be honest, I haven't checked for the date that that's due to finish, but it's been going on for a little while. So hopefully some point this year we will get that response there. Finally, just a quick update, because I've mentioned this previously, excuse me. Currently, Ofsted do not have the authority to inspect multi-academy trusts. They inspect the individual schools within the multi-academy trust, but they don't inspect the trust structure or the trust itself. That's particularly important for me when it comes to child protection and safeguarding. The schools might have it individually, but what happens at trust level can be really, really important and influential. This bill aims to level that playing field, basically, and bring multi-academy trusts into the remit of Ofsted. It's had its first reading. It's got its second reading on the 18th of March, 2022. So I will keep you updated as to where that is going. I'd be really surprised if this didn't go through, given we've had 16 to 19 provisions and SPIs brought in last year. I think this will go through relatively easily. So if you work for a multi-academy trust, prepare yourself. Ofsted will likely be inspecting you inside the next 12 months. As soon as this, I don't see any reason why this won't become legislation. So as soon as it does, then watch out, because Ofsted will be coming. If you're worried about what your safeguarding processes look like as a multi-academy trust, get in touch. I've been doing a number of audits of multi-academy trusts. You have some unique issues that need to be considered ahead of any Ofsted inspection. So let's have a conversation and I can help you make sure you're prepared and that your safeguarding works, importantly, at multi-academy trust level, because it is not going to be enough to say this is what our schools do. You are going to have to demonstrate what you do as a multi-academy trust. Okay, we are almost at the end. So things for you to consider over the next few weeks. Well, information sharing and court orders come up every time in my briefings. Information sharing, I don't think it's going to disappear, frankly, because we're really not great at it. Or sharing them. Oh, actually, what I should say there is sharing the right information. I think as individuals and as organisations, we can share information. What we're not perhaps brilliant at is sharing the right information, because we don't know which bit of the jigsaw piece we hold. And so we share bits of it, but not all of it. Because working out what's relevant can be really difficult if you're not kept and you don't know the full picture. So that's why it's really important that information sharing stays on here, but also that you think about, as a safeguarding lead, What information are you receiving, and what information do you need to make better informed decisions? And if you aren't getting that information, how can you get that information to make sure that you are making those better decisions? Court orders, really important to consider at this time of year, because unfortunately, in the world of family law, we are into what is known in legal worlds as divorce season. So families that have maybe kept it together up until Christmas now decide they no longer want to be together. Why is this important for you? Well, one, there's the impact on the child or the children, regardless of their age, of their parents separating, or of their parent and a significant other separating. But also you may find that there are, over the next few weeks, maybe months, requests coming from parents about statements, about court information, about how they want to stop somebody seeing their child, or how they want to have contact with their child, or how they want their child to come and live with them, and you'll provide a statement for me, won't you? I know that members of the Leaders Hub are already starting to see some of these things, and we've been talking about what their responsibilities are in relation to that, so just keep an eye on those. But the two big ones, which are issues that have come up in the last couple of years, but really seem to be, I'm not going to say peaking, because that means there's a fall coming, and I'm not sure there is at the moment, but the rise in mental health issues. So not just around suicidal ideation and self-harm, which of course are big safeguarding concerns, but lots and lots of low-level anxiety, depression, stress for students, and them trying to manage it in potentially risky ways. So again, not suicidal ideation or self-harm, but turning to alcohol, turning to drugs, turning to groups that they may not normally fraternize with, feeling really vulnerable, so they're turning to maybe less salubrious people than you would want them to be with, becoming isolated, those sorts of things. And it's a watch, and I'm sure all of you are, in relation to that. And the other side of that is the stress levels for staff. This has been a really, really trying couple of years. If you're working in education, then it's the exam issue that is coming, or not, hopefully. We'll get a firm answer on that. But even if you're not in education and you're working around it, and with young people, you will find that they haven't stopped, or they're worried about funding, or they're worried about what does the next round of restrictions or not look like for us, what's happening in terms of staffing levels because of COVID, or even not just COVID. I've been knocked off my feet for the last couple of weeks, not with COVID, but just not feeling great. So general winter illnesses that we've not really had for the last couple of years are now floating about as well, which puts increased pressure on the staff that are in. So being aware of their well-being is really, really important. Quick update then in terms of our winter and spring training. We've our designated safeguarding lead training. The initial is this Thursday and Friday, with a refresher next month. We've also got a specific safeguarding programme for those aged 16 to 24, or those working with them beyond the referral programme. And if you want to talk to me about our Safeguarding Leaders Hub, then do send me an email, and I will talk you through what that looks like for you. Have a lovely afternoon. If you've got any questions, I am here. But that is it for our briefing today. Thank you so much for your attendance.